Hello, thanks for joining another of the Good Projects professional development sessions. Today's session is about purpose and mission. These are words that come up a lot when we think about how to help people be focused in doing good work. And we're going to cover what these terms mean and do a few exercises together that help us think through our own purpose and some examples of mission. First, you might want to consider these questions. How well do you understand what gives your life meaning? How much effort are you putting into making your goals a reality? How often do you hope to leave the world better than you found it? And how often do you hope that the work you do positively influences others? These questions are taken from something called the Purpose Scale, which was developed by Kendall Bronk and her colleagues. And these questions are meant to get at or try to understand how much of a sense of purpose you have about what gives your life meaning. But what do we mean when we say the word purpose? So these three components comprise what we would consider to be purpose, and they're taken from the work of Bill Damon, who is a psychologist at Stanford. So Damon says that purpose fulfills these three particular elements. First, purpose is not just a short-term goal, but is a long-term goal. So purpose is something that directs you as a goal. It's not just about something like maybe looking for a parking spot for a few minutes or trying to buy something. But it's something that is over the long term that you are seeking to do or achieve. So that could be something that guides you for years, maybe months. It's personally meaningful, so it's not dictated by someone else, but it's something personally meaningful to you. It's your own sense of purpose. And then finally, it has to be not just about you, but beyond the self. So your purpose can't just be about self-fulfillment or self-achievement, but it has to have some kind of pro-social purpose or a purpose that is in some ways interacting with the wider world. What do we mean when we say mission by contrast? So mission is an enduring statement that kind of puts your purpose into action. So it's related to purpose, but may not be exactly the same. Your purpose can be internal, but mission is really about maybe how we would conceptualize it is putting it into a statement that can be shared with others. And this can be institutional. So a lot of organizations have missions themselves, but missions can also be personal. You can have a kind of a personal mission statement that encapsulates your purpose. I wanted to give some examples of what this might look like in practice. So these are mission statements, personal mission statements that students wrote for themselves based on some work we were doing with teachers recently, collecting information from the lesson plans they were using with their students. And these students wrote down the following. So I would like to help people, especially those unable to help themselves, and make it my profession. I'd like for people to see me as someone who is resourceful and enabling. And then I'd like to use data or statistics to analyze and make predictions that would benefit people. I'd like people to see me through my predictions and conclusions. So you can see here how these examples of mission statements might be effective at putting purpose into action. And you can also see how maybe they relate to those three elements of purpose that we talked about. So the personal meaningfulness of this to these students, the beyond the self aspect, and also a long-term view. As I said, organizations and institutions can also have missions, so these would be some examples of those. So for Teach for America finds, develops, and supports equity-oriented leaders individually and in teams so they can transform education and expand opportunity with children starting in the classroom. And again, another one, the American Cancer Society. The mission of the American Cancer Society is to improve the lives of people with cancer and their families through advocacy, research, and patient support to ensure everyone has an opportunity to prevent, detect, treat, and survive cancer. So you can see whether you think these mission statements are clear at putting maybe purpose into action, communicating something about the organizations that they represent. And we want to think a little bit as well about the relationship between purpose, mission, and this idea of good work that we've been covering in these sessions. So again, as a reminder, good work being these three elements of excellence, ethics, and engagement. So we could think about purpose and mission really being related to good work through these three elements. So Maybe because of the personal meaningfulness of a purpose, that's a requirement, it's going to be something that's engaging to an individual. They might be more likely to feel that motivation and engagement in their work by having a sense of purpose. The beyond the self aspect really relates to the ethical and responsible components of good work. The goal-oriented and effectiveness aspects of what it means to have a mission can relate to excellence. So maybe if you have a sense of what your goal is and you're able to conceptualize it as a mission, you can be more likely to achieve excellent work. That could be a relationship we could explore. And then the idea that we're guided by our values and responsibilities, as well as reflective practice and hopefully developing our mission and purpose, can lead us to hopefully use these ideas, mission and purpose, to achieve good work. But why is this all important? So we wanted to share some research-based findings. So research has found that having a purpose can be associated with a variety of different positive outcomes. That includes better physical and mental health, happiness, a stronger sense of feeling happy in the world, even stronger personal relationships. So having a purpose may lead you to develop relationships with other people that are somewhat related to that purpose and higher motivation. And also a mission, whether that's an individual or shared mission, can provide direction and also unite people, especially if that's something that happens in a group or is an institutional or organizational mission, maybe uniting people around a common vision. We want to just pause here and do this reflective activity that can help you think about purpose. So this is called the Purpose Magic Wand, and this has been used in research as well, some of Kendall Brunk's research. And it requires you to just pause and think about the world around you. So take a moment to consider maybe your home, your community, where you live, the world at large, different groups you might be a part of, and visualize what you would change if you had a magic wand about the world and your place in it, if you could change anything. So pause and think about that for a second. And then once you're ready, maybe you've paused the video here, ask yourself, why did you choose what you did? What does that reveal about maybe your desires and your sense of purpose, how you see yourself in the world? What concrete steps as well might you take to move the world a little closer to that ideal or to those changes that you spoke about? And this exercise has been found to help people maybe develop a sense of purpose a little bit deeper. And then second, now that you have that sense of purpose, maybe you've identified some things that you would like to change and really had some insights about how that guides your sense of purpose. We wanted you to do this activity. So you can do this on your own or with colleagues if you happen to be in a group. It's called a mission statement critique. So on this handout available at the link at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to access a series of mission statements. These are randomly chosen organizations and their mission statements. You can choose one or more to discuss or to think about that relate to your own sense of purpose that you identified in the previous magic wand exercise, and think about some of the questions on this screen. Is the mission statement effective at communicating purpose and action? Could you improve any of them? Maybe there's something you would change about the mission statement. How do the missions relate to the 3 dimensions of purpose, having a long-term goal, being meaningful personally, and also beyond the self? And then what could a personal mission statement for someone doing good work in one of these organizations look like? How do these statements maybe relate to the 3 E's of good work? Or how could somebody make these mission statements of organizations personally a mission? What would that look like instead? So take some time to pause the video here and think through these questions. And I should also add that you don't have to stick to just the organizations that are represented on this handout. You can feel free to bring in other missions of organizations that might be especially related to your own sense of purpose, or maybe there's organizations that you particularly like their mission statement that you would like to discuss. So pause the video here and think through this. And when you're ready, you can come back. So moving on, we want to also think about, now that you've had a chance to consider your own sense of purpose and then some example mission statements, hopefully from some organizations. Think about as educators, many of you are working in schools or other educational organizations. Schools often have mission statements associated with particular values or character strengths that may be guiding something about that school's educational practices for students. And also the fact that mission-driven institutions might be especially effective at achieving goals. We want to think together about how, as schools and educators, we can really make mission a part of our daily practice. And to do so, we wanted to highlight a few things from a research project that I and others completed on the United World Colleges Network several years ago. And so this was a multi-year investigation of the UWC network. We were looking at their mission statement, which is making education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. And one of the things we were doing was trying to see whether that mission was actually present in practice in the schools. And these schools are unique in that they bring together students from over 100 countries, each of 18 sites across the world, and they do the IB program, but with a really strong emphasis on international mindedness and a strong extra academic and service program. And what we saw, just a few of the findings, was that mission was, by the majority of people, felt to be strongly or somewhat represented in each of the schooling environments, but others felt more neutrally, or maybe that the mission was somewhat unrepresented as well. And when we looked at actually the breakdown of the particular components of the UWC mission, we saw that there was a spread with no one particular aspect of the mission being mentioned by a majority of our interviewees, which included faculty and staff, students, and alumni. People kind of mentioned different dimensions of the mission. So some of them mentioned the uniting factor, some of them mentioned peace in particular, some of them mentioned the sustainability aspect, but no one of these won out a majority of all people. And then in observational settings, so we were sitting in on not only classrooms, but also extra academic activities, different clubs that students completed or were members of. We saw that the mission was implicitly represented in about half of the settings, but the mission was rarely explicit, or much more rarely explicit. Only in about a fifth of the settings that we sat in on was the mission mentioned by name. And so from some of these findings, we wanted to make a few recommendations just for schools in general about how to make mission really explicit and also a part of their daily practice. So building unity amongst stakeholders in a school seems to be really important about bringing a mission of a school down to different stakeholders that are represented in the schools. That includes teachers and students and staff, parents, the community at large, even potentially. Trying to build unity amongst all of those people about the meaning of the mission and how its terms are defined seems to be particularly important for building clarity and a set of shared goals. Then second, be explicit about what a mission means for learners and what impact a school wants to have on those learners. So maybe not only building a shared definition about what a mission means, but also then second would be really trying to be clear about what that means for educational practice and what kind of outcomes are expected. What's the theory of change surrounding this? How do you actually want that mission with its terms to be implemented? And then third, relatedly, is to plan deliberately to embed the mission into the pedagogy that's happening and the educational practices within the school. So even with a shared vision and being explicit about what you want students to do or what kind of experiences you want them to have, that may not be enough unless you actually put that into practice in the day-to-day and think about how it shows up in different educational environments. So with that, we wanted you all to think about your own context and your own educational experience and think about what is your school's mission? How do you hope your school's mission influences students' sense of purpose or their missions and their development of those, if at all? And how are mission and purpose present in your classroom? How do you bring these ideas into your classroom practice for students? Maybe both individually, how do you help students develop their own mission, but then also the mission and purpose of the school? How is that communicated in your classroom? So take a moment here to pause and think about these questions or to discuss this again if you're with others, colleagues. So we hope you've had some time to reflect and or discuss. As a wrap-up routine from today's session, think about what is one thing that you would like to do with or say to a colleague or student as a result of today's session. What's one takeaway that you're leaving with that you'd like to share with someone, whether a colleague or student, in your own context? And with that, we hope you had some takeaways and maybe some epiphanies about your own sense of purpose and mission, a deeper sense of what those terms mean, and are thinking a little bit more about how it shows up within your own school or your own practice as an educator. Thanks for joining us.